you just asked it?
Yeah, no, I got it right here. So thank you very much, Juan Zavala, for joining me in this conversation. Juan is a friend of mine that I've had been working for. We worked together at MasterCard back in the day. So Juan, if you can help me with stating your name and a little bit about your background and experience in the fintech space.
Sure. So my name is Juan Zavala, originally from Mexico, live in the US for several years. That's where I met Camilo working at MasterCard in Miami. I think we have the pleasure to work together like what, 3 years around that time.
Yeah, about good times.
Based out of Miami, I moved then to Colombia, and I've been in Colombia for the last three years, and I'm building my own company. It's a fintech. It's called Finzi. Finzi, pretty much what it is a digital banking and learning platform. So we are a neobank or digital bank focusing on teenagers, Generation Z, to be their first banking solution and give them access to financial literacy and financial services at the same time.
Nice. So how did you come about this Finzi, right? So I know you guys are focusing more on the youth and kind of getting into that space. Did you guys see a gap in sort of the way that people were teaching financial literacy? How did you embark on this journey?
So I think it's a mix of things, right? The truth is that we're not recreating the wheel here. Like, we are adapting a model that it's been done in other developed countries, including Europe, where we have seen players being really successful to go after the segment, right? So we have some of the most well-known team banking players, which are based out of the US. So we sort of like took that knowledge and kind of, what they were doing in those developed countries and try to adapt it to the Colombian market, right? That was one thing. The other thing is that there is a big need for financial literacy. The truth is, like, nobody really teaches you about finances, and you pretty much learn by making mistakes. And the system traditionally here in Colombia doesn't really focus on giving access or financial literacy to teenagers. Their main target of customers that they want to go after is usually your middle class worker that's 30, 35 years old. Just try to offer them a financial service instead of focusing on a younger segment, like the Generation Z.
No, that does make sense. And you guys made it gamified, right? You guys made a gamification aspect of kind of learning through the process, kind of going like the Duolingo route, kind of making it a game, right? Is that correct?
So we have so within our platform we have two things, right? So we have a fintech component, which is the financial access. So we're giving real bank account attached to a debit card that the user can use anywhere where the card is accepted. In this case, it's Visa, anyway. And there is a edtech component, so educational technology component, right? So we do have gamification throughout the app, so the way they sign up, the way they use the platform, and things like that. However, we do have sort of like a video game embedded into the app that we're actually taking the student, well, not the student, sorry, the user, from the most basic educational, financial literacy component to the most complex ones, right? So literally, it does have gamification, but on top of gamification, it actually has like a virtual game type of approach, right? So you go through challenges, you earn lives, you die, you don't have enough lives, you have the opportunity to actually customize your avatar. So it has a bunch of like different things that it's a little bit more than just gamification as a concept, right? It's actually a game that the user gets to play in order to learn about finances. And then they learn, and then they go and apply into their real bank account. It's an engagement tool. So exactly. Like to make engagement into the platform itself, right? So it was sort of like, how do we create both things? And gaming right now, it's super relevant in the segment. So it was sort of like
keeping the user on the app as well, right? Kind of making sure that they're growing on the app. So you embarked on this adventure fairly recently during COVID times, right? Was there something about this specific moment of COVID during the pandemic that sparked the urge for you to come out with this company?
So I think at the personal level, COVID did kind of push me to make the decision and like to leave my corporate job and really pursue my dreams and really do what I want to do for myself. So it was more like a personal type of approach, when COVID happened, make a lot of us thinking about what we want and how we're doing things, and about this. So that was sort of like part of like my personal push on that perspective. However, I think COVID in general pushed the whole fintech ecosystem and users to be more digital friendly, right? So it kind of pushed the acceleration of digital penetration of financial services because people weren't able to go to branches, right, or do stuff in a physical place. So
Yeah.
you were kind of like forced to do it. So I think that COVID really accelerated the process for us to help users understand what a fintech is and how do they access financial services through a phone instead of having to go to a branch on that perspective. So I think it was a mix, right, at the personal level and at the business ecosystem level, I guess. COVID definitely accelerate things and it made fintech a really like interesting and hot area for investors to look at, right? So
it made sense for you to kind of just launch at that moment, right?
yep.
Yeah. So startups are normally, right, you guys started up on the ground, are normally naturally agile, right? But they're also pretty much very fragile, right? It's very easy for them to fall and kind of break. And so has the agility of fintech startups enabled them to weather this crisis differently? What would you say is the reason that you guys have been growing so much in terms of this specific crisis of COVID, and how has it affected the fintech market?
So I think we are still pretty new, right? So I cannot say if we're fragile or not because we're still, just getting off the ground now. It's true, right? You are able to build things faster and go out there faster and be more agile, but at the same time, it's easy for us to break. One of the things that we have done, and it just do a lot of testing, right? What works, what doesn't work, what moves, what doesn't move, and try to reshuffle things. So that's has been our approach and everything that we've done, and we have changed our stuff like a million times. And I'm sure we're gonna continue changing it because it's just the way things are, right? What works and what doesn't, and then how do you reshuffle? I think that the models on how startups are set up and established in Latin America and I guess in the whole like tech world makes it easier for entrepreneurs like myself to really go out there and make these mistakes and reshuffle and do things like that, right? So you have the backup of like investors that they give you their funding in order for you to go and sort of like play with it, right? Fintech in specific, it has a lot of benefits because there is a lot of things that have been proven and we know what works in some markets, more developed markets like Mexico and Brazil and things like that, so that we can replicate what is the right onboarding, what type of product can you offer to the segment, things like that, right? So I think it's been good for us to be like a agile startup to build things, but we're still pretty fragile. Like we are in the works, still developing a lot of the stuff, and it just, like I said, you can build it fast, but it can break fast as well. So
you guys are still fluid, right? You guys are still fluid, and you guys don't have any ridges or any walls. Essentially, you guys are breaking borders and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, right? So that's kind of the model for you guys. In your experience, was there any economic support measures put in place by the Colombian government in terms of startups, or you guys just kind of went on it on your own?
So no, not Colombian government at all. Like we actually just did fundraising from private investors. So we have a couple of angel investors that are behind us, and then we have some small VCs, so venture capitalist firms, that they give us funding for us to do this, right? We don't have like grants or anything like that. It's just it's a methodology that it's pretty well known in the tech startup world, where investors give you money, they give you their blessing, and then you just go and do whatever you want to with it, pretty much, right? So we were pretty lucky that we got that right at the beginning, and that was sort of like one of the key aspects of us taking the chance in doing this, right? So we personally, we didn't put any of our own money into this. It's all been private investors' money.
Was there anything specific in your decision making in regards to Colombia as the first market you guys want to go into, or was it just because you guys were already inside Colombia that you guys saw the gap, or were there any other options? Was it Mexico an option? Was it US an option? How did that decision making go?
It was a mix. Colombia, I think it's a pretty good market in different aspects. The talent is one. The ecosystem in fintech, the rules, the regulation and stuff, it really allows for new companies in fintech to to exist.
Mhm.
And on top of everything, even though I'm Mexican and I was born there and stuff, I don't really have the same networking connections that I have in Colombia. So here in Colombia, I was really able to establish a banking relationship with the key player that we needed for the infrastructure, like within a month.
Mm.
I was able to really navigate the regulatory aspects, uh, understanding better the ecosystem. So there was a bunch of like key metrics that we could like, not metrics, key facts or milestones that we were able to accomplish because of my experience and network that I have here locally. Also, I think Mexico, Brazil, like those bigger markets, if you screwed up there, you're ruining the rest of the markets. Like it's harder for you to go into Colombia if you're already messed it up in Mexico. However, if you're in Colombia and if you mess it up and then you want to go to Brazil or Mexico, then you can reshuffle or adjust and it doesn't really affect you much, right? So
So it's kind of, yeah,
my point of view was like, let's nail it in Colombia before we can scale it to other markets. And then
that
on
makes
top of
sense.
everything, in Colombia and in Mexico, you have direct competitors of us that are doing the exact same thing we're doing in those markets. So it was like a bunch of different things that it just made sense for us to start in Colombia as the initial market.
No, that makes sense. Have you found any resistance coming from the classic banking structure? I know Colombia is a very classic banking with the major players, essentially. And did you find any sort of kind of pushback from the market or kind of resistance of the market while going on this adventure and kind of growing in Finzi as a company in terms of the classic banking structures that exist already in the market?
So we don't deal directly with any of the big banks that control pretty much 80% of the market. We deal with a smaller type of bank
Mhm.
that's super flexible. They're very super welcoming on the model that we're pursuing because it also benefits them. But I don't know. I mean, to be honest, we're going to become competitors of the biggest banks, right? So
Exactly.
even though they might be willing to be open to new players, but the truth is, at the end of the day, we're competitors. It's not gonna be like look well by them. However, none of the banks have a strong focus on the segment that we're going after. So we haven't got any like, let's say, pushback or anything like that from the big banks. And the one that we're working with, they're super open and willing to work with us, and we've been working with them for this last 6 months already.
Nice, nice. You guys have no like spaces, right? It's all online. So it's 100% online banking, right? So you guys don't have any plans of an expansion also and growing into more like space, like classic banking. You guys want to keep your space, kind of have that own space, right?
Yeah, we don't have physical offices. The bank that we work with, they do they have a few branches, and they have networks of what is called like corresponding banking. So our users can go and benefit
Corresponsales.
for that, but it's not our network, right? It's a
Mm,
network that we're lending, I guess, or that we're using.
yeah.
So like if the user wants to make a deposit in cash from their savings, they can go and make it at like one of the corresponsales bancarios that they have, right?
Mhm.
So, but it's not
Um,
ours. It won't be like a Finzi location per se. That's it.
Thank you. No, that's good. I think I hit up all my questions that I've wanted to touch with you. Maybe just one more for anybody who's looking into the fintech space, right, and kind of looking into expanding or making a business into that. What sort of advice would you give to that person who has an idea for a banking app or for a financial literacy app? What sort of advice could you give them in terms of how to manage themselves, how to conduct themselves in the regulatory spaces, in the banking spaces? What would you give them as a sort of advice, or maybe even you younger, right? A version of you a couple of years ago that isn't as wise now and experienced as you've been for the last couple of years. So what would you give yourself an advice?
I mean, I think the best thing I can give you is like look what's going on in developed markets like France or UK or anywhere in the world and see what's moving, what's generating value, what's really like moving the needle for the fintech space in those countries, and then try to bring it to like a place like the Latin America is like an easy thing to do. I think regulation nowadays is pretty simple. I wouldn't say simple, but it's clear. in the majority of the market. So like Brazil, the rules are pretty clear. Colombia, the rules are pretty clear. So like there's a good understanding on how you can operate. So that if you have a business model that you think is works in UK or France, if you can just tweak it and adapt it to the country you want to go after, you understand the regulatory landscape a little bit, then you're good to go. I think that will be my recommendation. You can innovate somehow, and maybe if you think it's not innovation for France or UK, it's still innovation for Colombia most likely, right? Try to stay away a little bit from like crypto and like digital currencies and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of potential, don't get me wrong, and I mean there's going to be huge things coming out of that. I just think it's a long run for you to really get to it, right? Our plans is to do crypto and stuff at some point with the platform, but we need to start somewhere, right? So right now we're just focusing on the most like traditional stuff that it's already a need that the users have, right? So
Yeah.
I think that will be my two cents. There is no any secret sauce or anything like that. It's just
No, of course.
to know what's going on in France. I'm sure now that you're there, you've seen solutions or apps or things that people don't use, not even in the US, for example. And
There's also one more question I wanted to ask you that I forgot to ask. In
Sure.
regards to when you were doing an analysis of where you guys wanted to start, right? I know it was Colombia was the biggest one. Were there any kind of regulatory incentives, like from the government, not like an incentive, but like any regulatory framework that made it easier for you to launch in Colombia compared to other places, or was it just more of the connections and business that you had in Colombia?
No, Colombia is one of the few countries that have really clear rules regarding a model that's called banking as a service, where a fintech or a technology company lends or uses the license of a bank to operate as a fintech. Mexico, even though it's like super big and like they have a lot of fintechs and stuff, the regulation is not so clear, and it's been like a lot of ups and downs in the ecosystem. Brazil also is pretty clear. Argentina, sort of clear. Like there's some countries that there's really like clear understanding of that, and Colombia is one of those. So
it made a lot easier decision for you to kind of start in Colombia.
Definitely, banking as a service model here in Colombia works well, and it's clearly established what you can do and what you cannot do in the space. So that makes it easier for technology companies. Like
that makes a lot of sense. And your goal for Finzi is to expand obviously to the rest of Latin America, right?
Yeah, so we're aiming to go to like Latam, like everywhere, right? But like it's a pretty aggressive like goal.
Of course.
So we're actually trying to like determine what our strategy, like our expansion strategy should be. We are thinking to do secondary markets first before going to Brazil and Mexico. So we're probably gonna go to Ecuador, Peru, Chile, like more like smaller markets where there is no players doing anything in the segment.
Yeah.
Capture that segment and then go to like the bigger markets after that.
Yeah,
But
whether Brazil probably already exists, and Argentina already has probably applications like this that kind of target.
So yeah, there is players, right? The thing is like fintech is booming everywhere you go in Latam, to be honest. Like it's a big movement. The thing is that even though like big players like Nubank, they're not focusing on teenagers. I wouldn't be surprised if they do it at some point because it's gonna happen. It's just like a nature of the business. Yeah. But right now, it's too costly for them to focus on teenagers when they still have like 70% of the population of Colombia to be bankarized.
Yeah.
So
bank.
Again, I don't know. Financially included into the world. So they have a bigger opportunity to attack before going into teenagers, right? But eventually it's gonna happen. I don't know if you've seen it, but like in the US, Chase, the biggest bank of the US, has since like a year ago or 2 years ago, no, like a year, they've been like going super strong with the teenager and kids segment. They never done it before. They had a product before, but like they never done like now.
Never broadcasted it. Yeah, they never really did anything about it.
You go to their website and the first thing that pops up is like get your kids a bank account. Kids. Like now there is a strong focus because all the other players are eating the segment and they're like reacting to it. So it's just a matter of how it's gonna happen. So
that makes sense. No, thank you, Juan. I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your wisdom here in this space. And I really want to thank you for your time answering these questions.
Sure, no problem.